What's up, INC Live listeners? It's John, aka the Martian here, and we're about to talk about the UFC 270 card going down real soon. But we got to settle up some debts from the last UFC preview show, UFC 269. I said that if Tai Tuivasa and Juliana Pena both won, we would do a shoey for you, and Karl already did his, and it's time for me to settle up that debt. So we got ourselves a Black Cherry White Claw. We got ourselves our shoe here. And here goes nothing. Cheers. There we go. Got a little left. I'll finish it off. There it is. So, not going to be doing any more of those bets. That's a one and done type of thing. And let's get right into that UFC 270 analysis right here.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again for joining us for this latest episode of the INC Preview Show. My name is Karl Bainbridge, and I am joined as ever by the Morecambe to my Wise, the Reeves to my Mortimer. It's John Martian MMA. John, thank you very much for joining us. And the big question everybody wants to know, what did that shoey taste like?
I thought it tasted a little bit better than what you thought. You seemed to not enjoy yours too much. I might be doing more in the future, but it was fun to do that little challenge. Thank you to Juliana Pena and Tai Tuivasa for making us do that fun little challenge for you guys on the podcast.
And thank you very much as well for tuning in to our 2021 recap of the year. I have to be honest, that was just something that we just put together absolutely last minute. We wanted to try and get some kind of content out at the end of December. And 500, 600 people ended up watching that one. I don't know how long they watched it for, but a big thank you to everyone who had tuned in for that one.
Yeah, that was definitely fun talking about all those fights, recapping the whole year. It's crazy to think about all the fights that go down in just 1 year's time. It's crazy that like Poirier and McGregor 2 happened last year, because by the end of the year you've watched 500 fights and you're like, that fight happened last year. So it's fun to recap those fights.
And the great thing is we have another 12 months of fights ahead of us.
Yep, action-packed schedule. We had a great card last night. Calvin Kattar put on an amazing fight against Giga, and we had another great pay-per-view this week. I'd say good pay-per-view coming up this week. 2 great title fights, but the rest of the card looking a little lackluster. I'm sure we'll get into talking about that a bit more in the future.
Certainly so. Just a little bit of spring cleaning for anybody who wants to try and get in touch with us on all of our social media platforms. You can see those all at the top of our screen there. So we are available on Instagram and on Twitter, as well as our Patreon page, all using the same title, It's Not Cagefighting. So if you would like to support the channel in any way, please like, share, subscribe, ring the bell so you miss none of our content, as well as getting involved in all of our social media platforms. John just sort of touched on it there. We are going to be talking about UFC 270, our first pay-per-view of 2022. And I have to say, John, I give the UFC a lot of credit in certain areas in regards to how they produce these pay-per-views. And I think the back end of 2021 was absolutely fantastic. So you had 268, 269, the Abu Dhabi show, which was far better than any of us expected. And we're sort of getting a bit of a hangover from that, because yes, we have a big heavyweight title fight that a lot of people are looking forward to. There's intrigue around the trilogy and the flyweight division. But outside of that, rather lackluster.
Yeah, a bit top heavy on this card, which they tend to do every now and then. Obviously, the main event is a fight we've never seen before. One of the most interesting heavyweight title fights we've had in the past recent years. So I think everyone is really, really focused on that. And then the rest of the card is kind of taking a back seat. We're, of course, getting the trilogy between Moreno and Figueiredo. And it's their third fight within 13 months. So I just feel like there's not a lot of excitement there. And the rest of the card is taking some injury hits. But looking at the prelims, looking at even some of the fights in the main card, a lot of like UFC unknowns, a lot of fighters coming off the Contender Series. I mean, if you look at the prelims, it's seriously like like 90% fighters that are coming off the Contender Series or have less than 5 fights in the UFC. So a lot of unknown names on these prelims, and definitely not the same caliber as card as we were talking about for the past three, as you mentioned. Those had like incredible prelims from top to bottom. We're a little bit lacking with this one in terms of like a quality undercard.
Tell you what this feels like. This feels like the sort of pay-per-view the UFC would do pre-pandemic, where you
I
would
thought you were going to say
have
a McGregor card or something.
well, the McGregor cards, they usually stack it up with it's sort of guys who I think the UFC are quite high on, but they're not really established big superstar names. So you'll get people like a Macy Barber, for example, or someone of that sort of ilk, which they would put on the prelims and just try and give some of the McGregor rub. But it sort of reminds me of, say, like, can you remember like UFC 234 when you would have like Nadia Kassem versus Montana De La Rosa on the main card? It's that sort of show.
Yeah, that pay-per-view took some hits too, though, right? It wasn't like Whitaker and Adesanya supposed to headline, and it got canceled like the day before. Was that the one?
I think it was a few hours before.
Really? That's right. Yeah, the day of or something. Whitaker had to pull out because like a hernia or something. So, yeah, but I understand what you mean by that one. That's a good comparison.
You did touch on the prelim fights there. You can see those on our screen right now. As you mentioned before, no ranked fighters, a lot of unknown names. There are a couple of people, though, that may be somewhat relevant to sort of like the everyday fan. We're going to be focusing on some of those in a little bit more detail. And the guy who is headlining the prelims is one of those, Rodolfo Vieira. He managed to get himself a victory up against Dustin Stoltzfus in his most recent outing. But for a lot of people, he is the guy who gassed out and got submitted by Fluffy Hernandez.
Yeah, and we should definitely put a little disclaimer out there. This card could change around a little bit. This fight might end up being a main card fight because I don't think the official order has been published. The UFC's website isn't even updated from like a few days ago, so we don't really know the full order of this card. But yeah, definitely Vieira looked improved versus Stoltzfus. His cardio looked a little bit better, maybe even his striking a bit better as well. And this is a grappler versus grappler matchup. Turman, his bread and butter is his jiu-jitsu, so he's probably going to run into a bit of a brick wall here against Vieira, and I think Vieira should get this one done. The odds have him as almost a 3-1 favorite, so the market is kind of thinking that he should get this one done as well.
I was very impressed with what I saw from Vieira up against Stoltzfus, because if you listen to any of the interviews that Rodolfo had going into that fight, he was very open about the sort of psychological impact of what happened against Hernandez. He even admitted that he was a little bit nervous going into the fight against Dustin. And you sort of touched on it there. I thought for what was essentially a kickboxing match, yes, he used a submission to get it done in the end, but for what was basically a kickboxing match, I thought his striking was fairly solid.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like he really took, his training, his striking training, especially seriously. His cardio got better. So maybe that loss is just what Vieira needed to, get humbled a little bit, to start really working on some of his weaknesses. And I think we're probably going to see a continued improving version of Vieira here. Maybe he even gets like the first fight on the main card or something, because he could be, I wouldn't say a star, but he could be an interesting, top 10 fighter at middleweight in the future.
Yeah, Wellington Turman 2-3 in the UFC. Most recently, he beat Sam Alvey, even though he had 2 points deducted in that fight. Interestingly, though, never been submitted.
Yeah, he got knocked out pretty viciously back-to-back fights by Andrew Sanchez on the feet and then Bruno Silva on the ground. So his chin has taken a hit recently. Did scrape out that victory over Alvey. But Alvey will be around. He's not going anywhere. For some reason, Dana White loves Sam Alvey, even though he's lost like 7 fights in a row. This guy is just going to keep getting fights. So get used to seeing Sam Alvey.
One fight that you wanted to focus on in particular was a fight that originally featured someone who was supposed to be on the main card. Short notice replacement. It's been dropped back for now, back onto the prelims. You wanted to talk about Topuria versus Jordan.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely the fight that stands out. probably the number 3 fight on this entire card underneath the 2 title fights. And even though it was supposed to be a better fight than this, it was Topuria versus Movsar Evloev, 2 undefeated guys in the UFC. It would have been an incredible fight to see them go against one another. 2 undefeated guys straight up. I don't think either of them have lost in their MMA careers, and the odds were neck and neck for that one. Unfortunately, Evloev pulled out, and we got Jourdain filling in. I think it's a somewhat exciting replacement, just because Jourdain is obviously coming off that big win over Yule with that big kick at the end that kind of sent him a little bit viral. But looking at the odds for this one, I mean, Topuria almost a 5-1 favorite. So you're seeing that the matchup just isn't expected to be too competitive, and for justified reasons. Topuria is just going to be on another level in the grappling, and if he takes the path of least resistance with going to those takedowns, getting his jiu-jitsu going, it probably is going to look like a pretty easy night at the office for Topuria. But maybe we get to see some fun striking exchanges. Jourdain, a really exciting high action striker. So hopefully the fight is a bit entertaining instead of completely one-sided.
Topuria primarily a grappler. However, 3 of his last 4 wins have come from strikes, including against Ryan Hall. And I know that Joe Rogan gets a lot of criticism from MMA fans. His commentary during that fight wasn't his best, I have to say.
Yeah, I mean, I can't completely blame him, because a lot of the MMA community is kind of deluded about the fighter that Ryan Hall is. And he's not as good as people want to make him out to be. He did bounce back against Derek Minner recently, but that fight shows what anybody in the top 25 would likely do to Ryan Hall. So I actually enjoyed watching that from Topuria there.
Any other interesting names to look out for on the prelims?
Man, honestly, not much. I mean, I'd say the only other one is Raoni Barcelos versus Victor Henry. Barcelos has been, a surging bantamweight for a while. Suffered a minor setback in his last fight, losing a close decision to Timur Valiev. I definitely didn't think he lost that fight. It was either a draw or he won, but, the judges, they're going to judge as they typically do. And Victor Henry is making his UFC debut. A bit of a confusing matchmaking decision here, but I think this was put together on short notice. And it was supposed to happen maybe last week or the week before that. But Victor Henry seems like an exciting fighter, a very high action Tony Ferguson style fighter. So he's probably going to bring it, and he's probably going to make this fight exciting. So that's really the one other fight that stands out in the prelims. What about you? Do you have anything you're looking forward to?
I'm curious to see what we see from Kay Hansen, mainly because Kay Hansen was one of those fighters who, on the back end of 2020, she was sort of seen as one of the media darling of the UFC. They usually, time and again, they like to bring out these young, pretty, attractive girls. And if you remember, during the Venom launch, she's there alongside Brian Ortega, Aljamain Sterling, and I feel like the UFC was really trying to frame her as sort of like the next big thing, the new Paige Van Zandt, as it were. She took over a year out of action. I think there's been a lot of management issues relating to that, and she's finally back in action. First fight on the prelims, full stop. So I'm curious to see what sort of improvements she's made in the 13, 14 months since she's been away.
Yeah, that is an interesting one there. She's facing Jazz Davidius, coming off a win on the Contender Series, and that should be, a competitive fight. Hansen kind of got robbed in her last fight, if I recall correctly. I think the majority of people scored that one for Hansen, and then McKenna got some lucky takedown with 60 seconds left and won the fight entirely. So yeah, very interested to see Hansen back. But like I said, outside of that, a lot of fresh Contender Series fighters, new fighters. So I don't think the prelims are going to do too well in terms of ratings and perception by the fans.
We do have a familiar name opening the card, though. It's the name Nurmagomedov, but not the one that many people are thinking of. It is Saeed Nurmagomedov, no relation to Khabib. He's making his first main card debut, and he's taking on a guy who a lot of people have been very high on for a long time, but he's just hasn't managed to break through as of yet. It's Cody Stamann versus Saeed Nurmagomedov. Saeed making his first appearance since, I believe, over a year since he last appeared in the UFC. I think he was on one of the Fight Island cards. And Stamann, after a tough run of opponents, is this finally the chance for him to bounce back?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this fight. And you said it's not the one you're thinking of. Obviously, we're all thinking of Umar Nurmagomedov, the true prospect in the Nurmagomedov family. Even even if they're not all family or whatever.
There's Usman as
But
well in Bellator.
yeah, true. But he's kind of stuck in limbo over there. He's got to get over into the real organization. But I'm excited for Umar. Not so excited about Saeed, honestly. I think Saeed, his offense is just weird. I mean, he throws literally one spinning technique a minute, maybe more, just spinning back fists and kicks, and just a lot of spam offense, I would like to call it. If you watch his fight against Barcelos, it was a close fight, but Barcelos was able to hit those takedowns every time Saeed went for a spinning back fist or threw some, stupid, crazy kick of some sort. And, it really lost him the fight there. And I think the same thing is going to happen again here. You got Cody Stamann, an All American wrestler. He is comfortable in the role of wrestler and blanket. His fights aren't the most exciting at times, but he's the plus 180 underdog in this fight, and I think that line is just completely wacky. I locked in a bet on it last night. It stood out to me right away, and I think that Cody Stamann is gonna, wrestle this guy to a decision victory pretty easily. I think that Saeed's gonna give him all the opportunities in the world to hit those takedowns, and it's just a matter of can Stamann hold him down and keep that top game going to win 2 out of 3 rounds, and I think he's gonna do it. So I like the wrestler to pull off the upset here. I don't think it's going to be the most exciting fight. I think a Saeed win is definitely going to be more exciting than a Stamann win, but I'm here for the 15-minute grappling clinic for Cody Stamann.
I was very concerned by what I saw against Barcelos because you think obviously with that surname Nurmagomedov that the guy is going to be epic grappling, and I think he's fairly solid in some areas, but I did see times in the Barcelos fight where he only was managed to get him down on the ground. And Saeed wasn't really doing anything. I think he pretty much accepted the position, which I think was somewhat concerning from his part, especially against a guy like Cody Stamann, which, as you mentioned before, very good grappler. Stamann's a fascinating one for me in terms of how he fights, because he's got that quintessential wrestle boxer style. Like, if you look at him, you compare him to, say, like Chad Mendes or Michael Chandler, very stocky, low to the ground, and he uses the threat at the takedown to try and set up his striking. But the striking style he uses, it's not big power punches in the way that Chandler does. It's almost like a karate style. You'll see him throw the odd spinning kick and that sort of thing, and I think maybe he lacks a bit in power, which is a big reason why his fights go to a decision. Like, on paper, he's got a lot of strengths going for him as a fighter.
Yeah, and good points that you brought up for him. I think he has like some sort of record, or he's on the verge of some record for like most male decision wins in a row or something like that. All 5 of his UFC wins are decisions. The Song Yudong fight was a pretty controversial one. I think that was scored a draw. I think there's a good argument that Stamann won that fight. And yeah, I mean, you just hit the nail on the head. Wrestle boxer style, lands, some kind of soft punches, but I think he's going to keep Saeed honest with those punches on the feet. He's going to set up those takedowns, and he just can't get stuck on the feet, because if he gets stuck on the feet here, it's the big cage. Saeed's going to have a lot of room to move around, to be elusive, and he could be chasing Saeed down all night. So he's got to really time those takedowns. But if he does, I think, like I said, he's going to look like a real live underdog here. So I like a bet, a pretty medium-sized bet on Cody Stamann here.
I think if there's one thing Saeed needs to do, it's to make himself seem like the bigger fighter. One of the things I've noticed with Cody Stamann is when he's fighting opponents who he's a lot more physically imposing than, he can dominate the fight. We saw that when he fought Brian Kelleher. That was just a straight 30-27. But when you see him against guys who make themselves big, who are either physically big or make themselves seem big, his offense becomes a lot more limited. He's willing to sit on the back foot. He's a little bit more cautious. And I think Saeed could potentially do that through throwing these sort of like big spinning techniques. It's a high risk sort of strategy though, because if he does make one mistake, Stamann could easily latch onto one of those legs and take him down.
Yeah, I mean, good point. And looking at the size here, Saeed 2-inch height advantage, 6-inch reach advantage here. Stamann only has a 64-inch reach despite being 5'6". So he's got some pretty short arms, and he's going to be losing that battle of the jabs, the punches here. So yeah, I mean, I think the game plan is going to be pretty clear from Stamann here. It's just a matter of can he get those takedowns or not.
So I'm guessing you're going to be leaning towards Cody Stamann. Does he get that first finish?
Oh, hell no. No. 15-minute blanket, grapple fest incoming from Stamann here. All-American wrestling, baby.
I have to say, you look at the fighters who Cody Stamann has fought in the UFC. I've just got a list up here. Aljamain Sterling, which actually he was winning a lot of grappling exchanges against Aljo, which should show you how good his wrestling can be. Song Yadong, Jimmy Rivera, and Merab Dvalishvili. That is a murderer's row bantamweight.
Yeah, and even his wins, not the flashiest, but like Tom Dugansoy, Brian Kelleher, he beat, pretty easily, like you said. And we saw Kelleher last night show off some good grappling skills. Kelleher is a much better grappler than he is a striker, and Cody just made that fight look easy. I mean, it was not at their natural weight class, it was at 145, but still, he's a really good grappler. And, my position is clear on this one.
Now, we're not going to be talking about fight number 2 simply because we don't 100% know what fight 2 on the main card is going to be. As John mentioned before at the start of the show, there's a lot of chopping and changing in regards to what's happening with this card. It's a little bit cursed. Now, the original plan was this was going to be Greg Hardy taking on Alexei Olienik, so a classic striker versus grappler matchup. Olienik unfortunately had to pull out through to injury. Sergei Spivak was brought in as his replacement. And just a few hours after that, Greg Hardy tweeted on Instagram, "Hey, I've done some damage to my finger. I'm going to be out of that card as well." At the time we record this, Spivak is still on the card. Unfortunately, it's against an opponent to be announced. Let's just talk about some of the fights that fell through here. Where were you personally leaning towards? First off with Olienik versus Greg Hardy, and then the subsequent replacement.
Man, I don't even know how to wrap my head around Olienik versus Greg Hardy. I mean, you said classic striker versus grappler. I don't know if you could say that because that's a fight that is just so weird and unique to 2022 MMA. I mean, honestly, I think I would probably lean towards Olienik because he's still really durable. Like, he's not a guy you're gonna knock out with like one shot. You have to hurt him and then swarm him with offense. You have to stay safe from that takedown. And I just feel like Greg Hardy is bound to make some stupid mistake, get tied up, and get submitted with an Ezekiel choke in a hilarious fashion. So it's a damn shame we missed out on that one. And I was even more confident in Sergey Spivak, honestly, because Sergey is a good wrestler when he has the game plan to. Sometimes he gets in his mind that he's, a good striker, and he is kind of slow and plodding on the feet. He likely would have gotten outstruck and landed some, got bombed on by some big punches by Hardy there. But when he comes in with a wrestling game plan like he did against Tai Tuivasa, he is happy to play that role of spoiler and to grapple, to hit takedowns. I think he took down Jared Vanderaa. He took down Carlos Felipe in one rounds and, almost finished both of those guys. He did finish Vanderaa. So, like, when he gets on top, he can smash with ground and pound. He can go for submissions. He did against Tai. So I think he would have comfortably out-grappled Greg Hardy if that fight ever happened. What about you?
I personally lean in the same boat. I think that I would have favoured Spivak's chances against Greg Hardy than I would have done Olienik. I disagree with you in terms of durability, though. I've seen Alexei take a lot of shots, especially in these last couple of fights. The Tom Aspinall one is one that sort of sticks in my mind, where maybe he could have taken those big shots 2 or 3 years ago, but I think it's reached a stage where his age is starting to catch up with him, and I think that if Greg Hardy was to connect, and we know that Greg Hardy can blitz people very easily in the fight, I could have seen him get the win. I know there's a lot of conspiracy theorists out there saying that Greg Hardy intentionally injured himself to try and get out of the fight against Olienik because he feared the wrestling. I don't personally believe that one myself. I'm not too conspiratorial, as it were. I think that's hopefully right.
I put it at 30%. 30% that happened. So I'll give him the benefit of the doubt, but I'm not ruling it out.
Very nice diplomatic answer there, John. So Spivak at the moment is still remaining on the card. Is there anyone who you could maybe see him being paired up against? Is there someone you want to see him fight?
Man, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure they'll get some, chubby guy to fill in there. They don't have to cut much weight. How about we offer Jake Collier? Maybe he just smashed Chase Sherman last night. Didn't take any damage whatsoever. So if he wants to take the turnaround and get another paycheck, give it to my man Jake Collier.
Probably Jake Collier's best performance in the UFC in this sort of second run of his career.
Oh yeah, I mean, how could you not like this guy? I mean, he got robbed against Carlos Felipe. He should be on a 3-fight win streak, and yeah, I mean, I'm cool with giving it to my man Collier.
Would you put him in your boy stable?
He's getting up there. I mean, he's very. It seems a bit unsustainable that he can continue with this run because I mean he's just so obese. We saw this guy at middleweight. We know that he could probably get back down to that frame, but he's just like, yeah, I'm cool fighting at 265. I'm not changing anything up. So
I've heard people describe him as a reverse Cannonier.
yep, that's good. They look a little different, but yeah, I think that's a good comparison.
So I was going to say Jake Collier there. So Sergei Spivak is looking for a last-minute replacement. One guy who did get himself a last-minute replacement is fight number 3 on our card. Michel Pereira is remaining on this fight card. He is taking on a UFC newcomer, which is Paulo Fialho, former alumni of the PFL. He's also fought in Bellator time and again. He's most memorable, though, for his knockout of James Vick on the ex-MMA card last year. 4 wins in 2021. He gets a call to the UFC on short notice. This is going to be... Well, we all know what Michel Pereira can potentially do if he's let loose.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a good decision. I hope they keep this fight on the main card because Pereira is just like the perfect guy to put on the main card. I mean, you want exciting, not necessarily the greatest technical or boring fighters. You want exciting personalities on the main card, and obviously Michel Pereira has that: the dancing, the break dancing, the backflips, the crazy techniques that he loves to throw. So I don't have a problem with Fialho being on the main card because even though he's like a short notice UFC debutant, I just think that Michel Pereira deserves to be on the main card. So hopefully they keep this one there. I haven't really done too much tape on Fialho yet, so I don't have strong opinions on him. But like you said, 4 knockouts in 2021. The guy's clearly earned his spot. Also knocked out 2 UFC vets, James Vick and Stefan Sekulic, in his most recent fight. So nice to see the guy getting a chance in the UFC. In terms of like technical analysis, I don't have too much on this one yet. You'll have to check back on my podcast at the end of the week to get some more technical analysis. But what are you thinking for this one, Karl?
Personally, I'm going to lean towards... It's a strange one when it comes to Pereira. Pereira's normally a guy who I would back against when it comes to sort of like putting my money on it because we know he's talented. We know he's got the great spinning techniques. We know that his striking can be on point. But there's this tendency to play the showman. There's this tendency to just get a little bit too carried away. I thought we actually started seeing Pereira turn a corner. I watched that fight against Imadaev and he definitely reined back a lot of the clownishness about his display. And he put on one of his best performances in the UFC. And then with the Nico Price fight, which we have to remember, Conor McGregor undercard, big spotlights, big sort of pedestal for him. We went back to the clowning. We saw the spin. We saw like the flip into mount. And as we saw against Tristan Connolly, a guy who exuded too much energy early on in the fight, gassed out, and very nearly lost that fight. He ended up getting the decision up against Nico Price. He needs to be very, very careful about how carried away he gets. If he stays complacent and he stays intelligent, like he did for the most part against Diego Sanchez, like he did against Imadaev, it should be a walk in the park for him.
Yeah, I do agree with that sentiment. Nico Price round 3 got really hairy. He did lose round 3 on all 3 scorecards, and round 2 was a close round. He technically got away with an illegal strike by doing that jumping backflip. I mean, he did kick Nico Price in the head, which should have been a kick to a kick to the head of a grounded opponent, but the referee just let him get mount and it changed the entire round. So yeah, I mean, replay that fight 10 times. I think that Pereira could lose that fight, 3 or 4 of those times. So he did get away with a win there, but it wasn't an extremely impressive performance from Pereira in that Price fight. So Pereira is the 3-1 favorite in the betting line to this one, so it seems like it's pretty confident. I don't know though. Fialho, he's a hungry, aggressive guy. He's got knockout power. He's knocked out several opponents in a row. He's getting the opportunity of a lifetime here. I wouldn't sleep on Fialho here. I think that he could be a live dog, maybe a live knockout underdog bet for the main card here.
11 of 14 wins by knockout for Andre Fialho. As you mentioned before, great winning streak on the regional scene, fought in the PFL as well. I did make a couple of notes. I went back and watched a couple of his fights, watched the James Vick fight, watched some of his appearances in the PFL. The best thing I've noticed about Fialho is he is a great counter striker. So if we do have Pereira who is gunning forward, trying to make this sort of flashy spectacle fight, which we know he has a tendency to want to, we could see Fialho having a lot of success with that. There are some issues with defense. He ate a lot of head kicks up against James Vick, who Vick's never been known as a great head kicker, so that's maybe a concern for me. And another big concern is, even though he has a lot of knockout wins on his record, and he does carry a lot of power, he often waits a little bit too long for the perfect punch. And you sometimes get frustrated that you just see him holding back. And when he does connect, it works. We've seen that plenty of times. But I think he needs to be quite open. Hopefully, with the way the Pereira fights, he's going to get a lot of opportunities to counter. But if not, we could see him getting teed off, especially early in the match.
Yeah, that's a possibility. But even when Pereira he's had a close striking fights at Chaos Williams. I mean, that fight really could have gone either way. Pereira does have some key wrestling too that he can lean on to make this fight, go in his favor too. So look out for those takedowns.
I was surprised by that. I went back and I watched a couple of Pereira's fights. He's a pretty solid grappler.
Yeah, and he knows how to hit takedowns. He knows when to hit them too, which is pretty big. I think that's bigger than, his actual skill. He knows, close round, anybody's round, 1 minute left, I'll shoot a takedown, I'll ice that round. So, the guy's smarter than he probably gets credit for.
And durable as well. 11 losses, 8 come by decision, so he's a very hard guy to finish.
Yeah, it is true. But it shows that he could lose rounds as well. So look out for that one. It's a fun fight, honestly. I like I said, I haven't done full tape study on Fialho, so I'm a bit underprepared here, but still looking forward to this one regardless.
I think it's going to be interesting. I would favor Pereira to win this one. I think he will. I'm going to say second round knockout for Michel Pereira. I just think he's maybe going to overwhelm Fialho a little bit. Obviously, first fight in the UFC, so there's going to be a lot of pressure on him, which I think might come back to haunt him. There's some fighters who relish the big occasion and really sort of jump up to another level. We saw that with Chris Curtis in some of his performances, especially at 268. And there's other guys who, they become sort of shrinking violets when they get those sort of big spotlights on top of them, the sort of like octagon jitters. I've got the feeling we're going to be seeing that side of Fialho over the former.
Yeah, I'll go with Pereira by decision.
Yeah. So we have talked about our welterweight third fight there, which was Andre Fialho versus Michel Pereira. It's time for us to talk about our first UFC title fight of 2022, and we're going to the smallest weight class in the men's division of the UFC, and it's a fight that we've seen 2 times already. Brandon Moreno, the new UFC Flyweight title champion, I should say, he is taking on the guy who he beat to win that belt back in June, Deivison Figueiredo. So, first time in UFC Flyweight history, we are getting ourselves a trilogy fight. At the moment, the betting odds have Brandon Moreno as a minus 170 favourite. Figueiredo comes in at plus 140. The INC poll, which we posted earlier today, however, they're much more one-sided. Brandon Moreno, 79% to win this one.
Was Demetrius Johnson, Benavidez a trilogy, but I don't think all three happened in the UFC. But wasn't that a trilogy as well?
I think they only had the 2 fights because it was
I
the
could be.
first one to crown the inaugural champion. I think that was UFC 152. And then they had the rematch on the UFC Fox card, and Mighty Mouse won that first round.
Yeah. Okay, so maybe I'm wrong about that. Yeah. I kind of alluded to this in the beginning. It is a bit hard to get, super amped about this fight because this is the third time in 13 months that it's happened. Each guy has a win. Obviously it was officially a draw the first time, but let's be real. Deivison Figueiredo won that fight. Not really sure what the judges were watching. I think that Figueiredo won 4 rounds, 1, 2, 4, and 5. Even with the point deduction, he should have won 48-46. But the judges boofed that one badly. And then in the last fight, I mean, obviously Moreno looked spectacular, getting the third round sub. But I think Figueiredo looked, pretty compromised from the jump. Just did not look like his typical self. Obviously, some of that credit goes to Moreno for shutting him down, but just physically, Figueiredo was not there. I mean, this is a guy who was, nearly impossible to submit by Jussier Formiga. Formiga had him in all types of bad positions on the mat, and Fig still was able to stay, defensively sound, not get submitted. And then Moreno was able to, backtake him and submit him quite easily in that fight. I just think that Figueiredo wasn't really there for that fight. It wasn't motivated. And now switching up his camp, training at Fight Ready, training with Cejudo. I think we'll see some good improvements. I remember, you asked me what improvements we would see from Weili Zhang for training with Cejudo, and I didn't think much because, the Cejudo and Zhang's fighting styles just don't really align too much. Obviously, there's the language barrier, there's the gender barrier, but when you're talking about Cejudo, who is, a very similar sized fighter to Figueiredo, I think that they can really benefit from training with one another. So I think we're going to see a Figueiredo in a lot better shape, a lot more motivated for this one. I've seen a picture of him in camp, and he looks absolutely shredded. So I think we're going to see a lot more game Figueiredo this time around.
I think it's quite concerning that I saw the same picture as you, and I agree. He looked in absolutely amazing shape. But that kind of shape, that shredded, and you still got to cut another 9 pounds. I personally think that the weight cut, I mean, you've got to bear in mind as well, Figueiredo's 33, 34 years old? So he's getting on in age when it comes to the flyweight division. And I wonder, is that weight cut becoming too much for him? Because I did believe that the original plan was for him to go up to 135. And then Pantoja ended up getting injured, couldn't take his place in the title fight. And they convinced Figueiredo, hey, we'll give you a title shot, trilogy fight, if you stay back down. Win or lose, I don't see Deivison Figueiredo staying at 125 for much longer.
Yeah, that's probably right. I mean, he beat Perez, he beat Pantoja, Moreno. That trilogy settled. He's not going to be like, oh, I'm motivated to fight Askarov. Let me cut that weight and make it back down to 125. I don't think he's going to want any part of that Askarov matchup. So I agree. This is probably the last time we see Figueiredo at 125. Did that caption on the picture say that he weighed like 134? Where did you get that 9-pound number from?
I believe his manager said he's got another 9 pounds to cut.
Okay. Well, I think I don't think that'll be too bad. I mean, I think this guy was making pretty huge weight cuts in the past, and we know that muscle holds more water than fat does. So I think it'll be not too difficult for him to cut that because the guy looks like he has like not an ounce of fat on his body. So I think we're going to see a bit better weight cut, and bit better energy management. That definitely could have played a factor into how badly Figueiredo looked last fight. A bad weight cut. But what you said is true. Figueiredo is getting up there in age. He's, very experienced. Hasn't taken a whole lot of damage over his career, but I think the weight cut has just depleted that gas tank and that physicality of him a lot. While Moreno is still, improving. So basically, what I'm saying is, I think Figueiredo might have already hit his ceiling, while Moreno is still on the upward trajectory. He is still clearly getting better fight to fight. His athleticism has not begun to dwindle at all. So. I mean, I think you got to give the advantage to Brandon Moreno in this one. He's got the momentum. He's got, I think, the more consistent athleticism. Like, there's a very, very small chance that Moreno's athleticism is going to fall off, right? But meanwhile, there is a very real chance that Figueiredo is just, kind of permanently damaged. Maybe he'll never go back to that perfect form, that best form of his, which is probably going to be in the first Moreno fight, or maybe the Benavidez fights, or the Pantoja fight he looked incredible in. But there's a real concern about which version of these guys is going to show up, and with Moreno, you have a lot less to be concerned about on the Figueiredo side.
And the other thing as well he has going for him though is confidence as well. Like the one that always sticks in my mind when I talk about sort of like Brandon Moreno in the first fight and the second fight, it sort of reminds me of Frankie Edgar when he fought BJ Penn. Like BJ Penn was this legendary figure, unstoppable, the pound for pound best fighter in the world. The first fight, Frankie had the attitude of, I think I can win. The second time around, which was a much more one-sided fight, I know I can win. And I think that's what we're going to see from Brandon Moreno. And we saw that in the first fight as well. He maybe was a little bit nervous of Figueiredo's power. But I think once he started to settle into that fight, he ended up coming back into it, and we had that fight of the year candidate between the two. Second time around, he had the confidence. Yes, Figueiredo had a lot of issues with the weight cut, and I do think that Figueiredo was depleted, and I think that played a big factor in his performance. But you can't take anything away from Brandon Moreno. He looked a step above what we saw at 256. Whether or not he's going to make another big jump in improvement, I'm not 100% sure. Look, my money would go towards Brandon Moreno if I was pressed. But we have seen if Deivison Figueiredo can get the weight cut right, like he did against Joe Benavidez, like he did against Alex Perez, he is more than capable of finishing this fight. I would argue a 100% Figueiredo is a much more dangerous finisher than what Brandon Moreno is.
Yeah, I agree with that. And Figueiredo wasn't able to finish the first fight, even though he was beating Moreno up for the stretches of that fight. But Moreno is just inhumanely tough. So I
Yes.
feel like he's not going to get a finish here. He's going to really need to be patient to win the rounds here, to win the 3 out of 5 rounds, to win this decision, because I just think it might be damn near impossible to finish Moreno at this point. The guy is so durable, but Figueiredo digs to the body really well. He has great attritional tools like that. I think the leg kick for both guys is going to be a big factor here. Who can get that leg kick going and limit the mobility of one another, and shutting down the grappling. Figueiredo previously had really solid takedown defense. He was hard to hold down, but Moreno was able to get him down in that last fight, and hopefully maybe training with Cejudo has got that takedown defense a bit better on point for Figueiredo this time around. And, I'll definitely be picking Moreno, as a straight up pick. I think he's just the easier pick to make here, with the momentum being on his side, with him winning the last fight. But, I'll definitely be cheering for Figueiredo. I do like Figueiredo more out of the two, although, I have very high opinions of Moreno. But I would like to see Figueiredo get that win back. A part of me feels like a little annoyed that we're having to see this fight for a third time. Like I said, I did score the first fight for Figueiredo 4 rounds to 1, and now because of judging, because the judges, don't know how to watch fights, we're now having to see this fight for a third time in 13 months, and it's it's kind of a waste of both guys' time. I think that we could have moved on to more interesting original matchups, but we're having to see this fight over and over again. So the odds have Moreno at around 63% for this one, and it's crazy to see the odds shift around here. I mean, the first fight, Figueiredo was like a 75% favorite, maybe even higher than 75%. The second time, he was only the same odds as Moreno. This time, he was only like maybe 63, 65%, and now he's going to the underdog at 40%. So the odds are going all over the place. Last December, he was 75%. This January, he's down to 40%. So the odds just had a massive shift in this fight. So I think if you're betting this one, I think Figueiredo as the underdog is probably the bet to make. And I'm still looking forward to the fight. I'm still interested to see how it plays out. But I'm definitely not vividly or over the top excited for this one. I don't think you really can be. I mean, we've seen it 2 times already.
And I think as well, someone made this comment to me on one of the social media platforms, and I just want your opinion on this one. Would you say this is the golden age of flyweight? Like, bearing in mind where the flyweight division once was, where the UFC were looking to try and cut it, Mighty Mouse was this overly dominant, not especially marketable champion, and the UFC was starting to cut people. They cut Moreno, Dustin Ortiz, all these sort of names were getting shoveled out the UFC. To go from that to what we're seeing now, where not only have you got Moreno and Figueiredo, but you've also got Kai Kara France, Askar Askarov, Alexander Pantoja, Brandon Royval. Is this the best the flyweight division has ever been in the UFC?
I think I would lean towards like the 2014, 2015, 2016 era. The amount of really good guys that were on the roster back then that have kind of flown under the radar: Zach Makovsky, Dustin Ortiz, John Moraga, John Dodson.
Lineker.
It really was a special division back then. John Lineker, of course. I mean, I think it really flew under the radar back then because Demetrius Johnson was just so dominant at the top. But I mean, you can match up any two guys in that division and they would produce an exciting fight. Now I feel like the top 10 is in a really good spot. So a lot of interesting fights. Askarov, Kaikar, France, Pantoja. We saw Royval and Bontarin have a fun fight last night. I just feel like that the gap between, and this is a problem with all divisions, the gap between the top 10 and the rest of the division is really widening. And, I think that we're not going to see a whole lot of guys like outside the top 15 break into the top 10. That's just going to be the same guys kind of cycling over and over again for the next few years. So I still love the flyweight division, and it's in a better place than it was back in 2018, 2019, but I don't think it's at its all-time best.
It's time for us to talk about our main event of the evening. It is the heavyweight title on the line. Some people are calling it the most eagerly anticipated heavyweight fight since Lesnar versus Carwin. Your mileage may vary on whether or not you agree with that one, but it's Francis Ngannou versus Ciryl Gane, so champion versus interim champion, the first unbeaten fighter to challenge for a UFC heavyweight title since Cain Velasquez versus Brock Lesnar. But for a lot of people, the bigger argument, the bigger sort of feud going into this fight isn't Ngannou versus Gane. It's Francis Ngannou versus Dana White and the UFC.
Yeah, and I don't think I agree with the most eagerly anticipated. I mean, you're a little bit better with like the history than I am, but I mean, I think like Stipe DC1 it was more anticipated in this one, honestly. Gane is still fairly new to the UFC. Obviously, only been in the organization for 2 to 3 years, and his decision heavy style I don't think attracts as many fans as he deserves. And obviously, you have the Ngannou versus UFC battle, as you mentioned, taken away from the fight a little bit. Obviously, Francis talking about getting better pay. There's some, conflict going on with Ngannou's manager and the UFC and them not getting along. And, all the power to Francis. He definitely deserves more than he's getting. And, a big fuck you to every person who is responding to these articles, responding to these comments. Like, oh, Francis should manage his money better. He shouldn't. He's asking for more than 500K. 500K is good pay. I mean, those people are such morons. And Ngannou is completely right to be asking for more money. You got guys like Dillian White, Povetkin and all these dudes in boxing who are like not top 5, not popular guys in boxing, and they're still making $3, $5, $7 million a fight in boxing. And Ngannou is, the most popular heavyweight in the UFC right now. Just knocked out the undisputed champion, one of the biggest freak athletes of his generation, and he's fighting for 500,000. So the guy has a completely legitimate beef, and I kind of hope Ngannou wins just to see what happens with the whole conflict between the two.
And Francis Ngannou winning this fight is not the foregone conclusion that a lot of people believe it is. Because I'm actually looking at some of the betting odds and the polls which are coming out here. Ciryl Gane is a minus 125 favourite. You can get Francis Ngannou at even odds right now. And in the INC poll, Ciryl Gane 61%, Francis Ngannou 39%. Which, bearing in mind, Ciryl Gane only made his MMA debut in 2018. He's had 10 fights in the UFC, and he's the bookmaker's favourite over probably the scariest knockout artist that we've ever seen. I think it just goes to show that there is a lot of people buying into the Ciryl Gane story right now.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, a lot of people will probably be surprised to see that he's the underdog, and Gane has gotten a lot of action the past few weeks. At one point, this line was a pick 'em. They were at 50-50 pretty much. And, over the weeks, just people, bettors, excuse me, the market has been, really just steaming in Ciryl Gane. And, they're pretty confident in the Frenchman here. Obviously, these two both used to train together. There's some video of them training together. I don't think that video, bears too much weight. I mean, Francis Ngannou is like impossible to be good in sparring, honestly. Like, the dude is so reliant on his athleticism and power. And like, if Rosenstrike and Ngannou sparred, Rosenstrike would probably like 50-45 him. No lie. But the fight, when they're fighting for real, obviously Francis Ngannou can do the windmill punch and knock him stiff in 20 seconds.
We call
So
it the
it's just a whole
Juliana
different,
Pena.
Oh yeah, right. I think that's a little disrespectful to Juliana. She was working that jab a lot better than Ngannou was. Um, but rewatching the Francis Ngannou versus Stipe 2 fight from last night. I watched it last night actually. I mean, I was kind of impressed with how bad, or unimpressed, I guess you could say, unimpressed with how badly Stipe looked, honestly. It seemed like from the jump, he was just a bit nervous. He got hit pretty hard in round one, and his volume just wasn't there. I mean, the man threw 8 strikes in round one, the entire round, 8 strikes. And he got off to such a fast start against Ngannou the first time, and he got his takedowns going. He rocked Ngannou with some punches. I mean, he really set the tone in round one last fight. And then the second fight, he did virtually nothing in round one. And Ngannou is kind of similar to Derek Lewis in the fashion where if you are constantly attacking him, putting volume in his face, he's going to be confused. He's not going to be able to get his burst going, and he's going to be uncomfortable. But if you allow him the distance, the space, the timing to get his own offense going, to time his outbursts of offense, he's going to be deadly. So I think you can really look at the Ciryl Gane versus Lewis fight as maybe being a similar outcome here, where Gane is just given Ngannou so many different looks with the footwork, the kicks, the punches, the different angles, that Ngannou is never going to be able to get that burst of offense going. But it's an interesting fight for sure. You obviously have powerhouse versus technician. I think that's a pretty good way to put it. And I'll pass it back to you before I get towards my official prediction. But what do you think about most anticipated fight? Most anticipated heavyweight fight? You think that's true?
I think in terms of marketability, no. Because I think Lesnar versus Carbon was sold in such a great way. Obviously, Brock carries a lot of fans over from his pro wrestling days. So the idea of him being out of action for like a good 15, 16 months and this knockout artist just flatlining everyone. I think it was like 12 wins, 12 first round knockouts for Shane Carwin. That sold itself going into that fight. So it was like the powerhouse wrestler versus the powerhouse striker. In terms of intrigue, the elements of the unknown, I think it is up there. Because there's only 2 ways this fight is going to end. Either Ciryl Gane is going to just completely outpoint Francis for 25 minutes and win an easy 50-45. Or Francis turns his light off in the first minute. There is no middle ground.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking about that middle ground a lot because, like you said, Ngannou, everybody knows what his win looks like. It's a knockout, right? The guy cannot win by sub. He cannot win by decision. I mean, it's just not in his nature. I mean, I know he has won by sub before, but it's not happening here. And he's certainly not going to win rounds and win a decision over Gane. That's like virtually impossible for Ngannou to win a decision. But then you have to wonder, what does a Ciryl Gane win look like? And it could look like what you just described, Karl, a 25-minute outpointing, striking clinic put on by Gane. But what I'm wondering is that if with how explosive and powerful and sudden Ngannou can be. Is Gane gonna want to keep him around for 25 minutes to just steadily outstrike him as the fight goes? Is he gonna be comfortable with him? I mean, if he's up 2 or 3 rounds and Ngannou knows he's losing, I mean, he's gonna be going for broke, right? He's gonna be swinging as hard as he can. He's gonna be trying to get something going, and I just feel like Gane isn't gonna want to keep him around to to see those bursts come. I feel like Gane might actually have some ambition to get the fight over with before Ngannou can have that miracle comeback moment. So I think if you're picking Gane, it's got to be a real question of whether you think he's going to knock him out in later rounds 3, 4, and 5, or you think it's going to go the full 25 minutes. Because I think the full 25 minutes. Even when Ngannou is gassed, he's still dangerous. I mean, in the first fight versus Stipe in round like 4 or something like that, he had lost like 15 minutes in a row, and then out of nowhere, he lands like a big punch combination on Stipe, and
Going
Stipe was
backwards.
thankfully able to eat it. But I mean, yeah, right. I remember that one. Um, I remember it happened, but you saying that just kind of made me visualize it again. So I mean, the guy is still dangerous the entire time. Uh, you got to wonder what Gain's strategy is going to be, whether he's going to try to get him out of there, which he very rarely does. I mean, the guy is not a finisher. He even though he did finish Lewis in his last fight, he's not a finisher intrinsically. So will we see any grappling from Gain? Will he maybe get his top game going, look to win some rounds that way? It's really interesting to think about this one.
Good thing you brought up the grappling because I was just about to ask you about that. Do we dare see Ciryl Gane maybe try and utilize some wrestling in this match? I know a lot of people may be sort of erring against that because obviously we heard the sprawl heard around the world when he ended up stuffing Stipe's first takedown. But that was something that I think Francis's team prepped for. They knew that Stipe was going to utilize a wrestling heavy game because of what happened in the first fight. They're maybe not expecting it from Ciryl Gane this time around. So if Gane does get the takedown and manages to get Francis flat on his back, could we maybe see Ciryl finding some success there? Because he's a pretty underrated grappler. We saw that when he fought Don'Tale Mayes, he ended up finishing that fight with, I think it was a knee bar.
Yeah, or a heel hook or something. Yeah, it's interesting. I don't think we're gonna see a conventional, leg takedown from Gain here. He's not gonna hit a single leg, double leg, or anything like that. I think we could see like a trip from the clinch or maybe a caught kick or something. But I don't think we see any like conventional takedowns. That was hilarious. You said the sprawl heard around the road. That was definitely the most emphatic sprawl in MMA history. Like when everybody who like bet Stipe or was cheering for Stipe, once they saw that, they were like, "Fuck!" Like they just knew something bad was happening. Not only did he sprawl, he beautifully turned around to the side and started landing some punches. I mean, it was all over for Stipe after that point. It was just inevitable. So I don't think we see any, regular takedowns like Stipe went for. But imagine imagine Ngannou swinging that big combination. Ciryl ties him up. He's holding his arms. Maybe he hits a little outside trip, or maybe he hits a little like sweep of some sort, and gets Ngannou down to the mat. I don't think he's gonna submit Ngannou. I just think Ngannou is too explosive to get caught with anything. But it's possible. I would say it's unlikely that we see any grappling here, though.
And if you had to put your money where your mouth is, who are you going to pick for this one?
Yeah, I think I'll be picking Gain. I think I got to go with the technician, the better skilled fighter here. I'm always going to lean on that side of technique and skill, and possibly intelligence over athleticism. And but this is as dangerous as it gets for athleticism because Ngannou is just so explosive. There's such a difference in firepower difference. The punch power between these two guys is just night and day different, despite them being in the same weight class. And it's entirely possible that Ngannou hits one of those Rosenstrike-esque crazy bursts that clips Gain and sends him out cold. But I just think that Gane has proven enough. He's very proven over the 5 rounds. His cardio, his output is really good, and at his best, I think he can really give Ngannou some problems here. The big cage is going to be a big factor. I meant to say this earlier, but the part of the reason why Ngannou looked his all-time best versus Stipe could have been the small cage, right? I mean, that's a 30% smaller cage than the regular one. And in that big cage in Anaheim is just going to give Gane a lot more movement, a lot more area to get that movement, that elusive footwork going. And Ngannou is going to tire out. He's going to get confused. He's going to run out of ideas. And I think he might even get frustrated to the point where he kind of wilts and maybe gets finished in these later rounds here. So I think I'll pick that because I just can't see Gane sticking him around for 25 minutes, leaving that possibility of that knockout happening. So I'll go with the Gane fourth round knockout.
That's a big call to go for the knockout. I would personally lean towards decision, mainly because I think if Ciryl Gane gets himself like a 3 or 4-0 lead, I just don't see him wanting to do anything that may potentially put him in danger. So I can maybe see him coasting to try and get the easy sort of 25-minute judge's decision. I do agree with you, though. I think there's a lot of people underestimating the idea of Francis Ngannou getting finished by Ciryl Gane. It's especially if Francis starts getting a bit reckless, like you maybe insinuated. And obviously, bearing in mind what's happening with the UFC, Francis does have a tendency to get a little bit emotional, let outside influences affect him. Maybe we could see that in this fight. What this is basically to me, someone made a great boxing analogy. This is Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I mean, yeah, I like that comparison a lot. I hadn't really thought about it that way, but yeah, that's the exact same scenario I was talking about: power puncher versus technician, and that is a good comparison. Quick look at the odds though: Gane decision is plus 360, while Gane knockout is only plus 230. So at those odds, I think that you're better off taking a stab at the decision and holding your breath for 25 minutes because Gane knockout at plus 230 only. I don't think those odds are good enough. Um, I would rather take some stabs in the later knockout props like 3-4-5 knockout for Gane because I don't see Gane finishing him in the early rounds at all.
The way I'm interpreting the UFC contract, it's that if you are a reigning champion, you automatically get another fight added onto the deal. So if Francis Ngannou wins this fight, we will be seeing him in the UFC again. But if Francis loses, is this the last time we see him in the octagon?
Um, I'll go with yes. Um, I just don't think there's a whole lot for him left to do in the UFC, heavyweight division. I mean, it's extremely thin with contenders now anyway. I mean, outside of these two guys, I mean, who are number 3 and 4? Stipe and Derek Lewis, and Ngannou has fought both those guys already. Um, I don't think he wants to, stick around to fight Aspinall or anything like that. So I think that yeah, he has bigger fish to fry. I mean, I think he literally or legitimately could make some $1 million paydays with some boxing fights. So I think that yeah, I'll go with. I think it could be win or lose his last fight in the UFC because even if he wins, his contract gets extended, but he doesn't necessarily have to fight. So he's either gonna, have leverage to get paid big, and the UFC is probably not gonna do that. So it'll end up just being like a stalemate, and Dana will just talk shit on Ngannou relentlessly for the rest of his career instead of paying him an extra $1 or $2.
And if you need another reason to maybe bet back Ciryl Gane over Francis Ngannou, Morning Combat are doing their latest resume review on Francis Ngannou.
I saw that. You're big into that jinx, and it seems like it's
Because
happened, quite often, right? Yeah.
I believe every time they
Who's your
covered
pick
my personal pick, I'm going Ciryl Gane by
for the
decision.
fight?
But yeah, with Morning Combat,
Right.
every time they covered an MMA fighter on their resume review, they've ended up losing. So they've done like Conor, Adesanya. I think they did Pitbull for the McKee fight. They did one on Canelo and he ended up winning. But a lot of people are saying, oh, it only counts for MMA fighters.
I believe that. So yeah, I mean, bet the house on Gane. I think that's very realistic.
And that is, unfortunately, all that we've got time for our show. Unfortunately, we don't have a full 5-fight main card. Hopefully, John will obviously cover that one when it comes to doing his preview show with Aussie. If people want to hear you tune in and hear what you have to say about Sergei Spivak potentially and his short notice replacement, where is the best place for them to see you, John?
Yeah, you can, my man Ozzy. You can find us at Martian MMA on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, all the major platforms. You can follow me on Twitter at UFO_UFC. That's my handle. And I, send out a lot of tweets there about all different kinds of things related to the MMA world. So make sure you're following me. And thanks again to Karl for having me. Always love doing these INC live preview shows. And I'm sure I'll be back for UFC 271 as well. So I'll see you all before then. And thank you all for listening.
Yes, UFC 271 is just around the corner. We'll be covering that one in 2 or 3 weeks' time. I've lost track of what the days are like over in January. Once again, if you want to get in touch with us here at INC, we're available on Instagram at It's Not Cagefighting. Twitter, it's IN Cagefighting, and we've also got our Patreon page if you want to support us in any way. It's one of the big reasons why we've been able to get the brand new graphics package involved, so a big thank you to everybody who's been supporting the channel. Thank you as well for tuning in to the INC preview show. John, I know your beloved Eagles are going to be competing in the NFL playoffs, so I'll let you get to that. Until then, though, this has been the INC Live UFC 270 preview show. That's been John Martian. I've been Karl Bainbridge. Enjoy the fights.